right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started because I know we have limited time today. So as people trickle in, we'll just let them trickle in. But hello, today we are doing a Quaint tip on the SAP Business One feature functionality of the 1099 setup and processing. So I'm Elizabeth Middler, CEO of Quaint Business Solutions, and I also have the amazing Lauren Figarelli here to help me today to walk through this. Let's talk about what we're going to be looking at today within the application. So today we're going to be looking at 1099 table setups, business partner setups, how you do 1099 opening balances, as well as how you can make adjustments to your 1099, both increasing and decreasing. And then we're going to touch base on how you actually print all those forms out of SAP V1. So now I'm going to navigate into Business One, and we will start to walk you through all those setups directly in the database.
All right, wonderful. Thanks, Liz. I know we're both super excited to show everyone the 1099 processing in SAP today. And to start, as you mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about the setup. One of the first things we need to cover is something called the 1099 table setup. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate over to Administration, Setup, Financials, and the 1099 table. You'll see here that SAP has a few default options listed for the 1099 forms from the government. The most common being the NEC that you guys will probably recognize for non-employee compensation if your company works with outside contractors. Then there's a miscellaneous form for things like rent, and the interest form for used for interest on loans and accumulated dividends and things of that nature. What you can do here is you can actually double click on each row number. And when you do that, that'll open the 1099 boxes for the form. As you can see here, SAP populates by default what those 1099 boxes are. And I'm going to go ahead here now over to the NEC form, and I'm going to click that one. In each of the forms for the boxes, you will see that there is a minimum 1099 amount. So you can go ahead and specify that if it applies to you. In our case, I'm going to specify $500 for non-employee compensation. And so vendors who do not meet this minimum amount for this box will not be included in the SAP report that we're going to run a little later. And if needed, you can add boxes that may not be listed if necessary. So that's our 1099 table and boxes. I'm going to go ahead and click Update here as well. The next thing that we want to take a look at in the setup area is the business partner master data, because in SAP Business One, you can manage all of the setups for your 1099 vendors right from within the system. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate over to the business partner master data. And let's take a look here at one of the vendors. When I bring up my vendor, the 1099 data is actually on the Accounting tab and the General tab within that. You can see right here that we have a 1099 form and 1099 box designation. These basically serve as defaults for the vendor. And after this setup has been made, SAP will automatically populate this information onto each AP invoice and AP credit memo document for this vendor. And in addition, on the business partner master data up here in the header, you will see a federal tax ID for the vendor. Alrighty, so we've covered the 1099 table and boxes setup, as well as the vendor setup on the business partner master data. And the next thing to do for the setup is the 1099 opening balances. So I'm going to go navigate over there for a moment. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run the 1099 opening balances without any selection criteria here at all. Maybe you potentially have a vendor group or a property that you have set up to designate which ones you kind of want to look at. But in this case, I have a small selection, so I'm going to go ahead and open that up. If you're implementing and starting to use the 1099 setup after vendor payments have already been made in the current year, then this is when you will most likely need to adjust your vendor 1099 opening balances within this screen. And you can see here that I have certain vendors and I have dates as of which I'm posting their opening balance to with the form and box designation. And SAP will use these adjustments when generating the 1099 reports and forms. So I can see that for my top vendor, Acme Associates, I have an opening balance of $1,100. And for Anthony Smith, I have an opening balance of $6,500. And that's pretty much it for the setup for 1099 data in SAP Business One. But now I think maybe Liz, you can walk us through the use of 1099 or adjustments to the 1099 amounts in the system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you explain further the opening balance? Is it coming from the for example, for 2023, is it coming from the opening balance of last year-end balance of 2022?
It's coming from any balances within the year that have been made.
Last balance, basically, for the year?
Yes, the balance for the year before you start recording payments in the current year for that vendor. So basically, if you are setting up SAP, if you're setting up 1099 within SAP, and you have not specified, it's mid-year and maybe for the first half of the year, you haven't specified the 1099 designations on the vendor, meaning that all of the transactions and payments for 1099 for those vendors haven't been recorded. So it's almost like a catch-up or like a catch-all to catch those balances that haven't been recorded yet.
Okay.
And there's some certain scenarios here in which there's adjustments and things like that as well. And that's kind of what Liz is going to cover next.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few little nuances that you need to know if you're needing to make adjustments to your 1099s. So as you were pointing out and as Lauren was identifying, just to go back into the opening balances here for a minute, the opening balance window, if you need to make adjustments to a beginning balance, meaning, as Lauren already stated, if you had started in the year and maybe forgot to designate one of your vendors and have already paid them as 1099, you could go into this 1099 opening balance, add them in here, flag them for the appropriate box, and then add the amount that you missed. Okay. The 1099 opening balance window is the only way you can increase a 1099 balance, okay, for a specific vendor. So if you need to increase, this is the window that you want to use. On the documents themselves, let's look at a few things real quick. So on an AP invoice, when you designate a vendor as a 1099, you probably notice there's only one form and one box available. But let's say that you actually have a vendor that maybe you need to designate a couple different types of 1099 amounts for. That on the BP master, what Lauren went through is just the default. And so when you fill out an actual AP invoice to a specific vendor, that default information comes through onto this accounting tab in the form and box fields, as you see here. Now, as you're entering those 1099 AP invoices, you can adjust and say, actually, for this specific transaction, it should be a different form or a different box. I will state again to you that the whole transaction, though, is stamped. You cannot do part of a transaction, let's say, to rent and part to interest. You can only do it for one box field at a time. So again, then if you actually filled out your AP invoice and the document itself was for two different amounts, the way to then change those would be to use like the 1099 beginning balance maybe and add a box and say this part actually should be this. But I just wanted to note that this is the stuff on the BP master is a default. Transactionally, you can change this as you're entering, okay? Now, let's say you already entered, like this one is already entered into the system, And you'll notice that these boxes are still editable. So if you find that you entered and you're like, oh, I need to go make that adjustment, as long as the AP invoice has not been paid, so the status is still open and it's not had any payments on it, you can still adjust these boxes. That's why they're not grayed out. So I can change these, click update, and it will save in the system for my adjustments. After it's paid, just to show you an example here, and this one, you see the closed status and you see the payment applied. These boxes are grayed out. So after the fact, again, then to make adjustments, you're either to increase looking at the 1099 opening balance, or what I'm about to show you, to decrease an amount or an adjust amount down, you would be using the 1099 editing box. So the 1099 editing area can be found under the financial module here, and you'll see this 1099 editing. You can designate the filter criteria here for specific form and box. I'm just going to show in this example the 1099 NEC, and again, there's only one box, so it's checking that, and we'll see anybody by that criteria. So this 1099 editing shows me what to date I have as values in here through the AP invoices window. And in this area, I can actually change that amount. So again, when we were talking about that AP invoice, let's say that part of it is 1099 reportable and the other part isn't. So maybe really only 600 of this maybe was for this contractor's services, and the rest was a reimbursement of some kind that would not be reportable as a 1099. In this window is where I can make decreases to 1099 amounts. So I can change this to 600, click update, and then now it accepted that 600. And for reporting, that's the amount that I'm going to see because of the adjustment I've made in this editing window. If I tried to make this 700, you'll see down here, and I'm going to get an error message that says it needs to be equal or less than. So again, just to reiterate, because sometimes this is confusing, 1099 editing, I can decrease the amount. 1099 opening, I can increase the amount if needed. And then I do have the flexibility, as long as the document is not paid or closed, to change them after an AP invoice has been adjusted. Okay. All right, so that is kind of how you can play around with editing them as you need to. Now Lauren's gonna take back over and show us how we actually do the reporting in the system.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Liz. So upon completion of your 1099 editing, if you have any to do so, now you can run the 1099 reports in SAP and get ready to print your actual 1099 forms right from the system, which is really exciting. Under the financials module, I'm going to go down to the financial reports and the accounting reports and the 1099 and 1096 report. Okay, you'll see here in the box that there's quite a few options for the selection criteria. There are some summary reports available. However, when you're getting ready to run the 1099s and print, we're actually going to look here at the 1099 forms and have that radio box selected. As well, up here in the corner, we're going to look and show results or payments that have not been submitted through SAP yet. So SAP in the background keeps track of records that you print and submit versus ones that you don't. So in this case, we're going to show records that have not been submitted. And you can see here that there are different selection criteria for the forms in the boxes. Today, I'm going to have us look at the NEC, and you can see here that I have that box selected as well for that form. And for our purposes, I'm going to look backwards to 2023 for that fiscal and financial and tax year. And so that's why I have those dates populated here. I'm going to click OK to run this report. And when I bring that up, this is going to include all vendor transactions from SAP documents throughout the year, as shown as on the 1099 editing report, plus any 1099 opening balance designations that you may have made in that opening balances screen. What you can do is you can actually double click on any row header to see the detailed report for that vendor. So I'm going to click on this one down here, and I'm going to double click on that row. And when I do so, it's actually going to give you a breakdown of all of the invoices and the payments, and you can see the total payments and the 1099 payments. So down here, I can see for this row 1178, that was the invoice that we had for $635 that Liz went through in the 1099 editing and decreased it to $600. In addition, down here, I can see the last row I have is the opening balance that I had input for this vendor. And I can see here that the total 1099 amount is $6,500. So that's where we increased the amount, and you can see how it's displayed here in this report. Okay. A few things here is that when we're ready to print our reports, for the 1099 non-employee compensation, which is the one that we are kind of working with right now, the out-of-the-box layout provided by SAP prints 2 forms per page. For some of the other more commonly used forms, like the 1099 MIS for rent, the default layout assigned when printing these reports is set to 1 form per page. There's also another layout that can be designated to allow you to print 2 forms per page if you desire. It's recommended to print these forms. This is what we always do with our clients. We print these forms to PDF to allow for verification that the layouts and the margins are aligning with the pre-printed forms, because we know that the government loves to change those forms every so often. And if there are any print layout changes required, please be sure to contact your SAP partner for assistance, and we can definitely help out with those layouts. But now, aside from the layouts, I kind of want to get into the printing a little bit. You can see here again on the 1099 form printing that I have my results listed for my vendors and their 1099 payments. When I verified that the layouts look good and I'm ready to print, it's as easy as going to File and Print. And I'm going to print here to a PDF. Okay. You're going to see here that the next message you get on your screen is from SAP is it a final submission? This goes back to what I was talking about on the selection criteria screen right behind, where we're showing not submitted or submitted results. So by printing these and verifying and checking that, yes, we want to mark them as submitted, we can go ahead and click yes. Okay, wonderful. And I'm going to click the back arrow here to go back to my 1099 and 1096 report selection criteria. Now, since I marked those results as submitted, I can go ahead and click Show Submitted instead to get a review of those results. And when I do so, you see that those will populate automatically now, because they have been marked in the background by SAP as submitted. Now, there's one last thing that's kind of interesting about SAP that I wanted to show you today, and that is reprinting submitted forms. Now, let's say that I have already printed these 1099 forms, but realize that I need to make adjustments and reprint from SAP because there was some kind of mistake. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to, again, run this report showing submitted so I get my results. And now I'm going to do something a little interesting where I'm going to print again. So I'm going to go to File, Print. And in this case, I'm going to specify this to print to PDF because I don't really need to print these incorrect forms twice. But I just need to do so for a specific reason, which you'll see in one moment. I'm going to go ahead and print those. The next box that I get is actually, do you want to unsubmit? So this is a way for you to go ahead and kind of change what that designation behind the scenes is of these values and gives you a chance to edit and reprint again. It's really, really cool. So I'm going to go ahead and click yes. And now if I again change to show not submitted, I can see that I have values again there, and I can actually edit and reprint my forms, which is really, really neat. And with that, Liz, I think we've covered the 1099 setup, processing, and printing in SAP.
Okay. Well, now we'll open it up. Does anybody have any specific questions about what we went over today? Or any questions as far as editing or anything like that with regards to the 1099?
To clarify on the forms, we will have to order one form for miscellaneous and two forms for 1099 NAC, right?
Yes, so for the printing of those forms, the default for the NEC for SAP for the layout is 2 forms per page. So if you're ordering forms, those would be the ones if you want to use the default layouts. For the miscellaneous, it would be 1 form per page is the one that it uses.
Okay.
If you choose to use any other forms that are in any other formats, again, sometimes the government likes to make adjustments quite frequently. You would just need to edit the print layout for whichever form you're using. And if you're unsure of how to do that, definitely ask your SAP partner for help.
Got it.
So I missed that. So we have to order forms. We don't print on blank paper.
The forms will print as if they're printing on blank paper. So what we recommend, so you will need to order forms and put the forms in the printer before you print them. So basically it's going to print the data onto those forms.
Yeah, the IRS has their special forms that have like they're color boxed so that their machines can read them. So unless you have an outside CPA firm that's going to print them for you, normally you would get those pre-printed forms, load them into your printer, and then you would be printing the layout, which Lauren, I don't know if you want to, or I can show like how you change the default layout or kind of what it looks like. You can print it to a blank piece of paper if you want, and then see if it's lining up. But you would load it. See the example here, it shows you what the layout's going to be, but it doesn't have the lines because the IRS wants to have those like red box lines or blue box lines so that it can read them. Yeah.
So we just implemented this. We haven't tried this one yet. This will be our first time this year. So it will be a challenge for us, of course. But question is, if we, because you showed us that in the AP, when we process the AP, it should be, we have the option to edit it there, but for sure it's already in 2024, so we don't have the capability anymore to edit those because most of those were already paid.
Right.
So that would mean we will adjust all those in either the opening balance or the 1099 editing, right? To deduct or to add?
To start in 2024, what we would suggest first is to make sure that going forward, like right now, go to your BPs and mark them as 1099, right? So that going forward, those defaults are showing up and you're getting those reporting. Now, for the ones through January 1st through the 18th now, that you may have done payments for ones that should be flagged as 1099, you would use that 1099 opening balance window. And then you're going to put in that window for each vendor that should be designated what their box was that they should have been flagged as and how much you missed. And then what's going to happen, like Lauren was showing you, is when you get to the reporting, the report takes whatever's in the 1099 edit box area plus your opening balance amount that you designated. So it will catch you up basically for the ones that you have missed in 2024.
Got it. For as long as we plug the number in the opening balance.
Yep. That opening balance will be added to anything else that's actually flagged for the rest of the year. And then you would have essentially the whole year in the system for it to report on for you.
Okay. Do we still need to do the mapping or not anymore?
The mapping in which way?
Like you know, the non-employment non-employee compensation. I know there are several options from previous 1099 that I experienced. We have to, like, all those transactions, general ledger, we assign them to a different non-employee compensation boxes. We're not going to do it anymore here, right? There's only one option, non-employee or interest or dividends or rent.
Yeah, so like it used to be that I think if I'm understanding you correctly, it used to be that 1099 was on 1099 miscellaneous for non-employee compensation. I think it was like box 7.
Yeah.
Now, in the last couple of years, the IRS wanted to have non-employee compensation on its own in most cases. So yes, what you would want to do is for those that used to be designated as 1099 miscellaneous on the BP master, I would say go update them to be the 1099 NEC box 1. So going forward, they're going to hit the right one for you. And then if you need to make adjustments again on that editing window or the opening balance window, you can designate different boxes that need to be adjusted. So if you needed to decrease one that already hit on a 1099 miscellaneous box 7, you could go to the 1099 editing, make that 0, because you can reduce it to 0, and then add in the 1099 opening balance to increase, right, a 1099 NEC value.
Got it.
And
So
in
for-
that way, you would move it, basically, the ones that already posted maybe incorrectly.
Okay. Ooh, we should have done this beginning of 2023 then. I'm expecting to have a lot to the adjustments here for 2023 because we're looking at using this template for the 2023 year.
Yeah, and for advice on exactly which box for different scenarios, I would say, ask an accountant or CPA that you might be working with just to be sure which box you should be before you go do all of that. But then these are the screens that you would do if you're trying to pull it from SAP directly. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? So we will conclude today our walkthrough of the 1099 setups and processing. We are providing a link here, and I believe Lauren's going to send it to all of those who attended today in the chat. So you'll want to grab that. That takes you to a PDF download that you can get off our website of everything that we went over today with step-by-step instructions. So you don't have to rewatch the video or remember everything. There's no quiz. We gave you a PDF with all the steps for you to follow up. Okay, so that's what that link is. And again, we're going to send that here in the chat. If you have any follow-up questions, anything specific, this is also how to get in touch with us and our customers. You can send in a support email, and we would be happy to answer any of those other specific questions that you may have. But otherwise, thank you for attending. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.